Good afternoon, everybody. It's Richard McIntyre here from Tempest Consultancy, and I'd just like to intro this video that took place on the 31st of October this year at Gordon & Slater, UK Solicitor's Office, and thank Jayne Connelly from CCTV, a member of Care England, for hosting this amazing roundtable discussion. It followed on from the budget, and we discussed many topics within that. But the Strategies for Safer Care roundtable is just that. It's about care homes and the use of CCTV, not in personal areas, but in public areas, to stop elderly abuse. And Jayne is one of the founder members of that, following her own parents and how they suffered when they were in a care home. So I invite you to listen to the video and look forward to your comments. We have got another meeting coming up very soon, and it would be nice to hear what people have to say about safer care in care homes. And there are lots of organisations that are now signing up to this. So and Jayne is doing a fantastic job with her campaign. So over to you.
So Derek, I'd like to come to you. The thoughts on the autumn budget in regards to social care. What's been omitted? What did you find it a positive outcome?
The WhatsApp group has been viral this morning. With some of my connections who were very disappointed, to be frank, felt that social care had been ignored, that the NHS had continued to be the focus, and that the 600 million that was dedicated or mentioned about social care would really end up in being spent on children's services and young adults, where there's this legal obligation and very high cost of care required, and that's increasing all the time. So really the poor relation will be the elderly care element of social care is the kind of sentiment I think people are feeling, doubled with the raise in the minimum wage, because that's going to impact people straight to the bottom line. So
do you think it will impact care, the home carers as well?
Yes,
do you think it's
absolutely.
done anything for
Absolutely.
home carers?
I think it does create some challenges regarding that whole funding mix of getting an appropriate cost of care from your commissioner for the services that you're providing. And if your wage bill has increased across your workforce, how are you going to manage that differential?
Yeah.
Because a lot of businesses are borderline, frankly, at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's a tipping point. So unless that money filters its way in from the top, and you're fortunate to have self-funding access, so you can, people with affordability, you can turn up their fees, then you could see some businesses folding over here.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, actually. Trudy, being the MD of your own home care business, what are the challenges? And again, I don't want to sort of stay too long on the budget, because we've got other important issues, but just briefly, what's the challenges you found, or maybe not?
Well, I mean, I'm very proud to say that we pay more than the new minimum wage already, so that's okay for us. But the increase in national insurance contribution means that probably our increase to staff next year might not be as much as it would have been, because we've got this additional cost. We're not dependent on local authority contracts, but I just feel again it's the elderly person that's going to be hit, because the big companies that are reliant on these local authority contracts, who will now have to increase their minimum wage to what it's going to be. I know, some of the rates that local authorities are paying. How can they operate like that, with those being paid those fees? I just, something has got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the person that's going to suffer is the person sitting at home waiting for their 15-minute visit or whatever they get.
Yeah. And that's having a mother who had home care.
Yeah.
We had those challenges 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So can you imagine? Chris, welcome. I mean, from your perspective, how did you find from the perspective of care home?
Yeah, the budget, I think no surprises completely as it. I thought it was a true reflection of where the government placed the priority, which is the NHS. So in that sense, it wasn't disappointed. It was as expected. The challenges are the same, if not a bit tougher. we're a not-for-profit provider, so we have a pretty good mix of people who fund their own care and people who are paid for by the local authority or through the NHS. So we do live in a cross-subsidy kind of model, and it obviously adds pressure to that. Our ambition is to be able to always provide a bed for someone who needs a bed.
Yeah.
That becomes challenging. You know, the numbers have to work, and we can you have a cross subsidy that exists within a home, but we also, because of our spread of homes, we can leverage that across the country a bit more, where the demographics are slightly different. But still, it leads us to tough conversations and decisions.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get any easier.
No, and I agree, especially with, like you say, that the emphasis, which, you know, the NHS we all know is important. Paul, what's your view?
I mean, this is where I suppose I would answer it not from a care protection point of view, but as an NMC registered nurse, and just it feels like an opportunity missed, but it feels like it's something that has been that way for a very long time. The bigger picture of, yes, the NHS is the one that's going to get the headlines if they can be seen to have improvements there. But having been at the cold front myself, A&E departments get stacked up because there are lacks of beds on wards. The reason why there's a lack of bed on wards is because they've got people awaiting social care packages to go out and go to home, and the whole thing log jams. And actually, improvements to the NHS could happen with finance to social care, rather than just throwing more at a system that doesn't seem to work. Get the through flow right in any given large hospital by having the supporting social care in that geographic area with more beds, with better packages of care. Avoid the unnecessary attendances to A&E departments or the unnecessary admissions to hospital in the social care side, and all of a sudden the hospital can function far more efficiently because the social care side is...
So why don't you think, I mean, Jamie, well, I mean, I don't know whether you'd want to sort of touch on this, but why do you think that keeps happening? Why do you think that social care, which, you know, you've all touched upon, that I've asked, that the social care homes is such an important aspect of a person's journey from hospital into care home, if that's going to be the case? Why is it constantly the care homes are overlooked, or the care sector is overlooked? Because, you know, it just seems to me there seems to be a bit of a mental block, a void. So, Jamie, what's your thought on the budget with social care sort of being omitted in a way from the integrated, from NHS to integrated social care?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as you touched on, it was always going to be the NHS that was going to be the focus, and that's the big talking point and what the manifesto really said about, from my understanding of it prior to, they were very keen on promise made, promise delivered. I think it was the catchphrase of yesterday. I mean, difficulty you've got, I mean, I'm segueing probably into an area of my expertise a little bit more, is actually prior to the budget there were statistics released this week from the NHS Litigation Authority, which is the body that pays out essentially for all claims against the NHS which would enrol with social care that's run by the NHS, etc. And those figures were so high, and so feeding into that as well, perhaps, and I wonder if this is indirectly linked with that coming out, and whether the focus on the NHS is, we've got this black hole of, I think it was over 400 million that paid out in a period of time, where they're thinking, hold on, well that systemically is linked to the NHS, the dysfunctionality of it as a whole, and maybe I'm segueing away from just social care, which is a portion of that, but they're thinking this is something we need to address. Clearly the NHS is not operational as it should be, and that is an indicative sign of it, and probably a sad indictment of where it is. And back to your original question, perhaps why the focus was there rather than social care in itself.
Okay.
I think I'll
carry on.
I think fundamentally it's a siloed system where money and policy follows set parameters and almost fiefdoms, and rather than the journey of the rest of them through their life. And if it just needs a complete rethink, I think is the challenge. And I appreciate it's a big challenge, but that's what needs to happen.
Richard, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit disappointed that there wasn't the discussion about National Care Service. I thought perhaps there might have been a snippet in there. My concern is that national insurance increase will affect businesses, and then that will trickle down to workers. We know that. On Radio 4 this morning, there was a discussion about investment, and investment means taking more staff on and pay rises at the end, as you've already touched on. So I think there will be an effect, there will be a trickle-down effect to that. Because of the way the system is set up, direct government fund NHS directly, that's an easy model to look at, even though Wes Streeting has said that it's not fit for purpose and there needs to be a root branch review on that, which he's got in front of him, so he knows where we are with the Darcy report. And I don't believe that throwing money at it is the answer. Even the last government admitted that. There needs to be some reorganisation. Certainly the use of technology, I believe, is a good thing. And even in the sector that I support, we use technology quite a lot. And we'll be seeing that more so in the coming years with AI and robotics. So yes, there was a bit of disappointment. There was, the 600 million. I think fine, but it doesn't. That will go nowhere.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Richard.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, briefly.
On the NI increase, there is a solution to that. So if anyone wants to talk to me about that afterwards, please do. That can be mitigated.
That's interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think again, I don't want to concentrate too much on that, but it was just interesting to start it off to hear everybody's. It's such a current thing. Okay, what I wanted to get around the table and get the thoughts was, what do you think are the sort of key challenges that's currently facing carers and care providers in their role in maintaining high standards of care? And that's obviously something that Care Campaign for the Vulnerable campaigns on, and especially in light of the increase of dementia diagnosis. So, what do you think are the current challenges and how we can maybe address that? I'll go, and again, we all have to get our points in within a couple of minutes.
From my limited perspective, is retention and attraction of high quality staff without having the budget to pay the right wages. You're as good as the care is as good as the systems you have in place, but the people that are implementing those systems. And that's me thinking from a risk point of view, but I think to really.
Do you think that's the main thing then, the quality of staff? Or
it's quality of management and staff. The two go together. You get great management, poor staff. Delivering is a problem. Poor management, good staff probably doesn't work great either. But that's looking at it from a risk perspective. So that's the only perspective I've got on it.
Yeah. And Paul, what do you feel? I mean, from your perspective.
Yeah, what we get told by quite a lot of the care homes is, especially where they're predominantly local authority funded, capacity and the money that supports that capacity versus demand with time has just got a wider and wider gap. Because in real terms, the funding for local authority residents is insufficient to make sure that you have enough staff of an adequate quality. I'm not even talking about exceptional quality, I'm just talking about adequately vetted, trained, and their ongoing continued professional development within the care and nursing. They have more to do, but realistically with less.
And so what are the solutions? I mean, again, we could be here all week, but just on an overview.
It's trying to make sure that the care staff and the little details of all of the functions that they have to, or the duties they have to carry out on any given day, caring for residents, is as prioritised and streamlined as possible. And this is where you can take a look at new technologies. Let's not always look at it from a basis of cost and or potential cost savings, but the time savings that can be applied to care staff, to managers throughout the board can be huge, which means that frees up more time for those individuals to spend caring for residents or spend caring in people's homes. And the new technology is not necessarily about creating savings or coming at a lower cost. It's about making sure that the time of the carers is prioritised for actually doing the main part of their job, and that is interaction direct with people who are vulnerable and need that support.
Yeah, because I think from listening to you as well, Paul, everyone's going to have their ideas on what is the major challenges in care by what you do in a sector. So you know, and I get that. So Derek, what do you think are the challenges? How would we find the solutions with carers and providers? What are the main challenges?
Well, being from a bank, I'm going to say money.
Again, staff, money.
But I think the funding of it is inadequate to meet the demands of most people in the country who probably are on the affordability margins but will need care. Speaking to a lot of providers in the last 6 months, the acuity of the people that they're having to look after now is increasing quite considerably and quite rapidly, and a lot of them are coming in at a far younger age as well. So that changes how you have to facilitate the appropriate care. So there's more demand on staff, there's more demand on training, education, you then get regulation, you have compliance. There's a lot of pressure on a frontline care worker who probably can't concentrate on the actual core task, which is what they want to do, because there's all this other thing that's going on. Technology does help, and that will feature ongoing, but you've got to then train people on the technology, and you try and do that on the day job as well. So I can see that being quite difficult. And that all costs money. Ultimately you have to invest in these things properly, and staff retention's been a challenge since the pandemic. We monitor statistics across our portfolio of about 850 customers. We've seen that reduce, so staff are now beginning to become a little more sticky, but the turnover still is quite high, so it's probably earning up between 25 and 30% turnover ongoing. And we've got an ageing population, so again, do young people want to go and work in the care setting? We're probably not good at telling people what a good career it could be, and what an opportunity that there may be for them, and we probably rely on quite an ageing workforce generally. I
actually think that's a really good point.
Money.
Yeah, but I think what you said is a really good point as well, regarding how we sort of carers value the career path. It's not something that you tend to talk about a lot, or I don't hear it. And Trudy, as a home care provider, you'd have a lot of experience. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think just going back to that point about it's not seen as a valued career. I've mentioned this before. So my husband is Danish, so we spend a lot of time in Denmark, where being a professional carer is a really valued and well-paid job, and you have to go through, proper, not 5-day induction and then sign off with a care certificate or whatever. It's proper, like almost like a degree, and it's really valued. And you speak to people. My sister-in-law is actually a professional carer, and she's so surprised about how we operate here. What do you mean? Carers don't? What, they don't have education? They don't have to go and they don't? No, they can just do the care certificate, which we all know can be fudged so easily because lots of providers do it. So I think it's not seen as a professional and valued job in this country. The other point that I was going to make is about continuing healthcare funding and NHS money and waste and inequalities. We know it's not means tested, but I know our clients who manage to get continuing healthcare funding all have sons or daughters who are lawyers, quite frankly, and people that are going to shout loudest, and they have the same needs as somebody living down the road that really could do with that funding. And they can't get it, and it's such an inequality.
Well, it's funny because exactly, and the majority of cases that now come to Care Campaign and have done in the last year are families that want help in DST decision meetings and finance meetings. And I go in and the families actually say to me, in many cases, Jayne, you know, this is a reassessment. We've been told no. We've been told we're not going to get it, but we've shouted the loudest, so we're going in. And Care Campaign for the Vulnerable, we go in, and it could be something really slight, like emotional behaviour, that would be sort of addressed as having NHS continuing healthcare. And the amount of times I've come out of those meetings and they've had a response back saying you're now eligible for funding. I don't think they get enough support in these meetings. And a lot of families, and I think we've spoken about that before. Richard, what's your cause on the fact that, or your views on the fact about the challenges that carers face and the providers face?
Yeah, I resonate with what people are saying around the room. It always comes back to the registration of care workers in this country. I think that sort of chimes with what the Danish model is, you know, and other countries as well. We need to raise the standard of what we provide. And there are some really good organisations out there. Skills for Care do a lot of work in this area, so, you know, which I fully endorse, and I work with Skills for Care. But it is about raising the profile of what our care workers do and how people feel about that. And until that changes, it's always going to be in the margins. You know?
Do you think then we need a national push?
We need to have a national push, yes, to actually start to put social care on the front foot with good leadership as well. Because I think, as you've already highlighted, if you're working in a regulated environment, which we do, with a backstop of making sure that you're up to date in your registration, your revalidation, as you and I probably do every 3 years.
I did it earlier this week.
Yeah, so which is quite easy to keep, but also keeps you up to date and makes you think about things. I think it's about that, and it's about education. You're right. It's about making sure we have the appropriate people working in the part of the sector led by people who have a higher authority in terms of knowledge base to translate that down. And we know that works with good leadership in care homes. I've worked in them. I worked from some really good organisations. So I think it's a whole mix of stuff, Jayne, you know. And
I think
question.
Yeah.
But Richard, if you're talking about investing in staff and creating career pathways, and this question probably for Chris and Trudy, are you really going to do that in the real world with 25 to 30% staff turnover that you kind of reference, which I understand to be pretty normal? I mean, you might correct me.
I think we have to do it. That's exactly what we do to get good staff and to keep them, and for them to recommend their friends who are also great carers.
I mean, that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah,
if you develop staff, you'll be keep staff.
But that would be the point of it. Ideally, with that kind of a setup, you should take that 25 to 30% turnover with the aim of drastically reducing it, making it a valued profession.
So that's got to be a key strategic goal for you guys.
Wouldn't you say we're failing those potential care staff that want to come in? Because when I work with care staff, or care staff come to me, the first thing that, not all of them, but I've heard them say is, we want to care. We want to go in and care, because I used to care for my granddad, or I used to care for my grandmother, and now they're gone, and I just want to go in and care for people, and we're not actually doing that. That I find quite worrying. So, you know, maybe we need to look at the finer detail, and not just the sort of the training is so important, of course it is, vital, but I do think it's also allowing carers to be trained, absolutely knowing what they're going into. You know, care homes, I think Nadja said this, it always stuck with me. Care homes are now like mini hospitals, and carers thinking they're going in to these little homes where people are playing chess and they have no idea of the challenges particularly with dementia. Chris, I think as someone that works in care yourself, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, fascinating. Lots of really interesting challenges in there. I think coming at it from the other angle, the other end, if there are, is it around 12 million older people who need care? Of those 12 million, 400,000 would be living in what termed a care home. maybe 100,000 in extra care, those kind of things, and then in other people drawing on other services, either at home or family support, whatever. So there's a challenge over a kind of binary view of either it's a care home or it's a hospital and system. So for us, we have no issues getting CHC funding, for instance, but that's because care homes it's a much more established process than for people living in their own home. But for us, because care homes control their own front door, so the home manager is responsible to CQC for every admission that they make. So based on the competence of their staff turnover, their confidence in the competency of the staff, and their understanding of the mix in the home, they can decide to admit or not admit someone based on the complexity and the acuity of their needs in the mix of their home. So the challenge is I believe, run safe homes based on those decisions. But what we do that often by saying no to people that need care. And then you end up with a whole cohort of people, and where do they go? How are they provided with safe care? So that it's almost, there's a self-regulation here for providers who are wanting to make the right decision. And I would love to take you, but I just could not look your mum in the eye and say that I know we will be able to deliver the safe care that you need because of our staff levels. So there's that decision that's made on a daily basis at care home level. But it leaves a whole cohort of people who don't make it into a great home because they simply are not financially able to provide the staffing or the training needed to provide.
That's really worrying.
But there are probably some care homes that would accept that person. Might not be as
that person will be
managers.
That person will be kind of passed around to other.
And then it doesn't last because it breaks down and they get moved.
And we see that at Care Campaign when we support families, see it sadly a lot of the time.
So that would be one thing. And another thing that we do, because I do think, and I'm sure you're in the same position here, because we fairly obsessively focus on staff training, staff retention, and offering them the best environment that they can. And there is a huge element to care where it is vocational. People are there, they could go and stack shelves somewhere. There's something about, it doesn't mean they want huge career development aspirations. They might just love what they do and want to keep doing that all their lives. But there's a vocational element to what they do. So if they believe, that we are doing our best to pay them what we can, to train them, to support them, then I think our turnover rate would be very different from the national averages. And I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but it's something that we even from a mission statement point of view, which if you forget if you forget that as a PR exercise to simply think about what it really means to an organisation, for us it's about enriching lives. And yes, that's great for the residents, but we also apply it to the staff.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Thank you. Going on to because we've got quite a few questions, and I'll ask this one first. What policy reforms or changes are needed to better protect vulnerable in care, and how we can push forward at a national level? And we've touched upon it, but I think when we talk about policy reforms or changes, we can banter those words about a little bit, I feel, but what do you really feel is the catalyst for change with vulnerable people in care homes? What are the policy reforms needed, Derek?
Interesting. Well, I think the comment about litigation and the rise of the challenges with that, I think the lack of availability of insurance for a lot of providers and the cost of that,
which will come to you.
If you do get that, the cost is
all the
materially different now, but it's a requirement. So there's two triggers. We do have a failing regulator in England, so your oversight of compliance, quality care regulation is no longer trusted. And therefore you've removed a balance of that insight, additional governance or oversight, independent. You could argue it's not. And all those things leave a business and care a bit more exposed, I think. So therefore your focus must be to buckle down and increase your focus on avoiding undue risk.
Right. And that's a really interesting point, actually.
So you can't rely on other people to give you those steers and pointers and red flags and yellow flags because they're not there. So the responsibility falls on you.
Right.
You are.
That's a really interesting point.
So you have to almost become self-regulatory yourself. Now, you could go and self-regulate by getting independent inspections and mock inspections and bringing people in to do that. You might have your own teams that do that. I suspect you probably do. But a lot of providers don't have that capability or that, maybe that foresight. So I think it's very difficult.
I think Derek, you've touched upon the regulator.
These things might, if somebody takes charge and recognition of those should drive change in terms of legal requirements and frameworks. And
really good point, I think, and I want to go to Paul on that. I think you'll have something to say on that.
I mean, to me, you've hit the nail on the head. Far too long, I think.
Or we work really hard to influence providers to adopt independent safety monitoring. We believe in a third-party overview. But if providers say to us, look, Jayne, we want to go down the route ourselves and do this in-house, as long as it's done responsibly, completely transparently, then we will support any provider. And I think that's really important for where we are. How do we address, first of all, the financial pressures facing care providers while ensuring that cost-cutting measures do not compromise care quality? So, for example, say a provider that comes to us very regularly and says, Jayne, we really, really agree with safety monitoring. We can't afford it. So that is one of the issues that we take on board, that we listen to. I went into one of the largest care providers in the UK a few months ago, and I met with the CEO. I was invited in, and I sat around a table similar to this, and he listened to everything I said about transparency, safety, families' peace of mind, carers' protection, and he listened intently. And he said to me, and I didn't know this, he said, Jayne, do you realise that we are local authority funded 99.9% of the time? And I said, you're joking. I thought you were a private care home. That's how much I know in 12 years. I honestly thought they were a full private care home. And the CEO said, no, we would rather pay our carers the extra money. We would rather invest in other things that we see equally, he said, important. And I said, well, you've really opened my eyes to this, because obviously for you and for your business, the cost is important. So, Paul, I'll go over to Paul.
This is a lot broader than insurance, by the way. So
yeah.
The answer is to create additional budget. Yeah.
So talk a bit about.
Okay,
so say there's a provider that says we can't afford it.
So therefore we need to create additional budget for that provider, and so insurance is a tiny part of this. Okay, so how efficiently are you procuring? That's the first thing. Okay, so I'm the insurance bod, or I run the insurance team for the ERA Group.
Well, I hope you found that interesting, that snippet from our meeting in London on the 31st of October. And if you'd like to get in touch with Jayne Connelly, she's available on LinkedIn, Facebook, and also Twitter and Instagram. If you want to get in contact with me, you can do by going to my website, tempest.co.uk, and follow the link there and drop me a line and I'll get in touch with you. Thank you for watching, and look forward to the next time we meet for a professional meeting. See you soon. Bye for now.